third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen.
Pick and roll. And a foul. Offensive foul coming up. Ken Valentine standing right there.
Izzo dying for a moving screen.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn from The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhardt of UM Hoops. Dylan, we only get to do this twice a year.
Maybe 3 times.
Sometimes 3 times. Sometimes.
3 times. Every year this podcast has existed, we have done this podcast 3 times.
Is that right?
Because it's only been around for a year.
Well played. We're off to a riveting start. It is Michigan State on Sunday, 1:30, Breslin Center. We are recording this 9:45 a.m. Friday morning. Michigan State coming off a win last night against Illinois. Pretty decisive victory. Michigan has been off for the entirety of the week, dating back to last weekend's win against, help me out, Dylan.
UMass Lowell.
Thank you. So we are here. It is finally time to preview our favorite game of the year. Real quick, before we dive into this thing, we're going to get into the ball screen matchup and kind of walk everyone through the possibilities of what we might see, how Michigan will defend Michigan State, and how Michigan State will defend Michigan. And then we'll get into matchups, kind of saying who has the advantage at point guard, at the 2, at the 3, at the 4, at the 5, bench, etc. So a lot to pack in here, but make sure you check out all of Dylan's stuff on UM Hoops this week. Dylan, what do you have in the preview department?
So today we posted a first look, kind of going through some high-level matchups, just talking points, just kind of taking stock of where these two teams are. Obviously, a lot of people, especially if you listen to this podcast, are familiar with both. So just kind of setting the stage, comparing to last year's matchup, stuff along those lines. I'm also kicked off a Big Ten newsletter today that you can go ahead and subscribe to. I have a lot of Big Ten thoughts that I don't really have anywhere to put. So I'm going to run a newsletter starting today. You can subscribe to that. The link is in my Twitter account, or you can just go to dylanburkhardt.com and sign up there. So
this is all news to me.
Well, First of all, I did
not know that there was a dylanburkhardt.com. I need to go check this out.
There wasn't. So for all you Michigan State or Big Ten fans, you can get some of my stuff without having to read about Michigan all the time. So there you go.
Pretty good, man. The brand is growing. The Burkhardt brand. Look at this. Unbelievable. Well, that's outstanding. Over on The Athletic, today there will be a story posted on Terrence Williams Jr., Michigan's newest commit, who was finally able to track down both him and his father. And I will tell you, it is a crazy story. Not only the background in the family, but the father opened up on on Terrence's decommitment to Georgetown and exactly the dynamics that play there. It is, I think, exceedingly interesting. So when that story is up, I hope people will check it out. I will also, of course, be previewing some Michigan State story coming later today on Cassius Winston, his evolution, what he means to this game, and why I think a lot of his game is maybe a little bit underappreciated. That kind of translates to a matchup like this. We will talk about that in the point guard portion of this show. So a lot of people listen to this show and not a lot of the other ones, right? Michigan State is usually our most listened to episode. Dylan, you know the numbers. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
We while we have all these new ears, we really encourage everyone to subscribe to this podcast, and more importantly, we keep this thing ad free because we use this as kind of supplements to what we do that pay the bills. Dylan operating UM Hoops, me working for The Athletic. So if you like this, get on board, subscribe to both, and help keep us in business. So Thank you, everyone. Dylan, we're going to talk some ball screen because I know this is near and dear to your heart, and it will probably be the focal point of this game and what ultimately ends up happening in terms of winning and losing. So let's get into it, man. There's a lot to analyze from what happened in previous years to what we anticipate on Sunday.
First, let's go high level, even higher level than that.
Oh, baby.
Last year, these three games were all the last, 3 weeks of the season?
Yes.
I think Michigan and Michigan State knew exactly what they were at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Any sort of game plan was more about fine-tuning, not really about – like right now there's whole pieces that could change completely by the end of the year. I don't think either of these teams is convinced that what they are right now is what they're going to be. You agree with that?
100%.
There's 2 or 3 players on both teams that you could say, I would say that the coaching staffs probably expect to be a lot better at the end of the year than they are right now. So it's really, I think last year's matchup was really easy to preview because we sort of knew what both teams were going to try to do. This year, I don't think it's quite as clear. Do you agree with that, or do you think it still sets up pretty straightforward?
No, I don't. I think there's a better chance of the February matchup being a little bit more straightforward. I think this is kind of I'm all over the place on what to anticipate here. If it were Beeline, maybe you could feel that way a little bit more. But with Juwan Howard being a bit of a wild card, Michigan, we still don't know the status of Isaiah Livers. There's a lot going on here. So yeah, I think we're going to end up using this hour and breaking this game down, and then probably talking about a couple things after the game that we don't even mention today, if that makes sense,
Yeah, definitely. But we can get into ball screens. I just wanted to throw that out at the top because it's really striking as you dive into some of the numbers and the stats, and just compare the games last year to what we might see this year. It does have to start with the ball screen. I guess basically every game for Michigan on offense starts with the ball screen. Michigan runs as many ball screens as anyone in the country, and it is basically the basis of Juwan Howard's offense. I don't know. Do you want to start with Michigan's offense or Michigan State's offense?
Let's start with Michigan's offense. Michigan State defending Michigan.
So I wrote this in my piece today, but what happened last year, if you remember, is Michigan State eventually started switching most ball screens, forced Michigan into essentially isolating. I have the stats pulled up here, but it didn't work for Michigan. It was mostly Zavier, Simpson, and Jordan Poole going one-on-one, and both guys struggled to finish around the basket, struggled to really create their own offense, right? So Michigan State took away everything that Michigan could do off the pass, and as a result, Michigan's offense flatlined basically in the points in the game when it mattered most. It wasn't that Michigan completely fell apart against Michigan State. It was that Michigan completely fell apart at the most important time of the game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so I'm really curious here, and this isn't to go away from the ball screen. This is more I'm just trying to kind of gauge what to expect in terms of Michigan's offense on Sunday. Michigan State is going to come in, I think, with a pretty good plan for defending Michigan. And I think back to that Louisville game when, Louisville really was able to kind of turn Zavier Simpson into a passer, but not give him good passes. And if you remember, the roll man was never there, really. And what ended up happening was Michigan basically had to go into a straight post game and, use Zavier as a passer to the wings, and then the wings making entry passes to John Teskey and Colin Castleton. So, if the ball screen is not producing looks for Michigan, I wonder if we see a similar adjustment in this game, or if they ride it a little bit more, or if they have alternative plans.
So the biggest issue is that with Isaiah Livers' status up in the air, Michigan's ball screens are a lot easier to guard when Brandon Johns and Franz Wagner are on the wings. Both guys are shooting worse than 30% from three. Livers is a guy who's shooting 50% from three. If you have Livers and Eli Brooks on the wings. Those are guys you basically can't really help off of right now. Both have been pretty much automatic shooting, catch and shoot threes off of Simpson's ball screens. And without Livers, you're looking at a Michigan offense that is a lot easier to scheme for, an offense that you're probably comfortable not having to switch or do anything creative as much and think that you can just be really solid in what you do.
With, and that kind of brings me to Rocket Watts. He does give Michigan State a really strong presence when it comes to those guys that you're talking about that you can't leave, because he is, as far as I can tell, pretty elite when it comes to being able to stunt, being able to, sag off, being able to but recover and not give up open looks. So, when it comes to, if Michigan's going with kind of that straight two guards, I think he's going to be a guy that can still affect the game away from his man. And I do wonder how much of that three guard look do you anticipate?
So it's tough because you look at it, the natural reaction is to say, well, Michigan needs more shooting around the ball screen, put DeJulius in the game. Michigan State is going to play a 6'7" two guard and a 6'6", 215-pound three. Those are not good matchups for DeJulius necessarily, and that makes it tough to play that lineup. If you look back at the Louisville game, Juwan Howard really shied away from that three-guard look. Mm-hmm. I think mostly because Louisville had big wings, right, that were tough to kind of cover. And Michigan State's guards will offensive rebound, and that's a big test for a guy like Eli Brooks or David DeJulius to really be disciplined and box out, because they're going to have a half-foot size disadvantage in the matchup. So I think it makes sense to want to go with the three-guard look on offense, but I do think we've seen Juwan Howard hesitate to really stick with that look if the matchup doesn't allow it or enable it.
Yeah.
And it's going to come down to Brandon Johns is going to get some shots. Mm-hmm. He's going to get some looks. Does he take the shot? Does he pass up on the shot? What does he do in those spots? That's going to be a huge moment in the game, especially if I think it will sort of entice Michigan State to stick to what it does defensively more than they would otherwise. And that will give a look for Brandon Johns. If he hits those, then you might say, okay, and we might do something else. But that is really a swing point in, I think, how the two teams play on that side of the court.
I think the same goes for John Teske. I think they're going to leave Teske, give him shots. Obviously, Zavier Tillman is one of the best ball screen defending big men in the country. I think he will be as good as advertised defending the slip, and will be smart enough to know when to leave Teske on pops. And those looks, I think those looks are going to be there, and that's one of those pivot points where if he goes 3 for 5 and he's a guy that we're talking about after the game, that's how Michigan can go up to East Lansing and get a win. If he's just left alone and goes 0 for 4 and gives you, very little in those spots, that's a recipe for very much the opposite.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, what do you expect? Michigan has played primarily big at the 4 without Isaiah Livers. Do you see that? What kind of impact do you think that can make in a game in East Lansing, right? Like, Colin Castleton has proven to be a good rebounder, I would say, as a power forward. Has not done a lot else. Brandon Johns is also a good offensive rebounder. They give Michigan more of a crash the offensive glass look. Michigan tried to do some high-low stuff quite a bit over the last 2 games. I don't know if that's something that will work at Michigan State, but I do think it's something you might see based on just the fact that you'd be playing potentially without Isaiah Livers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to go big. I think you will see some of that too big lineup with anyone that watched Michigan State last night saw a very different Marcus Bingham have probably the best game of his Michigan State career against one of the biggest front lines in the Big Ten. Maybe that's, maybe actually in hindsight, that might even be reason to not go with a too big lineup, because if you can kind of stretch Michigan State out, the reason that he was really good against Illinois is because I don't think he ever left within 8 feet of the basket. And when Bingham comes undone is when you can get him out of way, put him in a ball screen, and then suddenly you see him on the bench. So that's probably the recipe there, now that I kind of talked through this. But
the overarching thing is that we saw consistently how John Beilein attacked Michigan State was to go smaller, do exactly what you say, spread the other team out, and pull Michigan State's bigs away from the hoop, make them guard in space, right? Yeah. We don't know what Juwan Howard will do, and we also know that he might not have the player who's most equipped to do that, right? Isaiah Livers would be a perfect matchup for Michigan in any kind of 1-4 ball screen, 1-4 pick and pop against a Marcus Bingham, for example, right? Like, that's a situation where we'd be talking about Michigan State will have to do something to play smaller if he was on the court. So that is definitely a big factor. Whereas I think Michigan State would much rather invite Colin Castleton to try to play inside against Bingham. That's 100%. A matchup they'll be comfortable with. 100%. So that's a great point.
I think if there were a guy like Livers to play, you wouldn't, and he's at a 4, you wouldn't see Bingham on him at all. You would see any combination of Henry, Kithier, Arns on him. There's no way that they would put Bingham in that situation. That's just so far outside of his comfort zone.
So if push comes to shove and Michigan's offense is struggling, I think you would probably look to Franz Wagner at the 4.
Yeah.
And that is just almost a complete wild card at this point. Franz has not played particularly well. I also wouldn't be shocked if Franz went and hit 4 3-pointers, right? He's a guy who would make Michigan State probably change some of its coverages in that position. I don't think they want Marcus Bingham chasing him around, but I don't know really what you can expect from Franz in that situation.
So, I mean, we're talking all of this about Michigan State defending Michigan, and we haven't gotten into Zavier Simpson. So, I wonder, they were very effective. Cassius Winston is not a guy that is touted for his defense, but Michigan State did such a good job on Zavier Simpson in all 3 matchups last year, and I wonder how replicable you think that is this time around.
So, Simpson, it's hard to figure out what to make of those games last year. I think the factor wasn't necessarily Cassius Winston's defense as much as it was Xavier Tillman's defense, because Michigan State switched so much. If Michigan State doesn't switch, it's going to come down to every other spot on the floor, and as far as staying home on shooters, because when Michigan wins, Simpson is going to have double-digit assists or close to it. So if you can prevent that, you turn him into a guy who has to score inside, and then I think you look at his 2-point shooting as the stat that determines the game, right? If Simpson shoots, I think I've had the stat in my story today, he's up over 60% on 2s in wins and 35% on 2s in losses. And I think he has twice as many 2-point attempts in losses. So those 3 games, teams have turned him into a scorer. I mean, do those hook shots go in? Do they not go in? That will really shape the game, right? And I don't see a way really that Simpson doesn't have to score in this game. Yeah. I don't really have a great feel for what determines how efficiently he scores. Tillman was really good recovering to a lot of those drives. He had a lot of blocks from behind, especially I think in the game in East Lansing. So that's the thing to watch. I'm just not really sure how to predict how it plays out. You want to flip it around and talk a little bit about, or do you have something else to add?
No, let's go.
Let's talk about Michigan's ball screen defense against Michigan State, because I'm really fascinated by this on a number of levels. The first is that Michigan State is not running as many ball screens as it did last year. I wrote this in my story today, but late in the year, Michigan State was up around 20 plus ball screens per game. The first half of the year, they were down around 14.
Mm-hmm.
This year, they're around 17, so kind of right in the middle of those two sort of identities, and they're far less efficient. So I don't know if that is a product of trying to do other things in bye games, trying to focus on other elements, but it's something to at least point out that this was a really, really good ball screen offense down the stretch, and that Michigan State team played differently really than it did for most of the year. Would you agree that they've not leaned on that as often this year?
They haven't as much, especially even when you go back to the Kentucky game and you remember they looked like the version last year, at the end of last year, and gradually have kind of gone a little bit away from that. And I've kind of been under the impression that ultimately the Michigan State of the second half of this year is going to look a lot like the Michigan State at the end of last year, in terms of rotation, in terms of that reliance on ball screens. I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see that today, on Sunday. But you're right that it isn't just running screens, and part of it is because always, almost without fail, Michigan State plays faster in non-conference play than it does in conference play.
That's definitely true. The other factor is that they do not have the same shooters around that ball screen.
Totally.
So McQuaid and Goins they made 129 threes last year, basically 3 per game on 38% shooting. This year, Michigan State's 4 starters other than Winston are 32.5% from three-point range. That's a huge difference, and it really gives you a lot of flexibility in how you defend Michigan State's ball screens in a way that last year's team, you couldn't make that. You couldn't take those risks. There's shooters that you can leave in this rotation, and that makes it a lot easier to defend a ball screen, just like we were talking about Michigan without Isaiah Livers. And there's a guy with a 2 next to his name and his three-point shooting percentage. Yeah. You have your guy to help off of and tag off of, etc.
Yeah, and this gets into what you were talking about, that it's so interesting to try to figure out what Michigan's going to do, because last year they kind of made Michigan State's ball screen into 2-on-2, a 2-on-2 game, and Cassius Winston just went to work. His pass outs just killed Michigan. And in fairness, a lot of that is based on what you're saying. They had dudes who made those shots, right? That's a question this time around. Coming out of last year, Michigan staff was, if they could have done it all over again, they would have used Charles Matthews on Cassius Winston a whole lot more, and they probably would have.
To be fair, Matthews was hurt in the first game and out for the second game.
I forgot he was out for the second game.
So it was hard to use Charles Matthews on defense in those situations.
But even beyond that, they certainly would have probably either switched every screen or just straight doubled Cassius.
So that's interesting, because if you look at how Michigan guarded ball screens last year, it was to hedge and recover, which essentially does put 2 guys on the ball, right? Teskey would extend those ball screens out and then try to recover, and then Winston would be able to wait until the last second and find Tillman around the basket. Michigan doesn't defend ball screens like that, which adds an entirely different element to how this plays out, right? So now Michigan plays its drop coverage. It still it doesn't like to overhelp on the 2, 3, and 4 in the ball screen, right? It still wants to force things into a 2-man game. But now you're basically funneling Winston into a shot instead of trying to prevent him from getting into the lane.
Which you could make a case, turning him into a scorer in the pick and roll could be a viable option. It might sound crazy in theory.
It's hard to say that the guy who averaged 21 points a game in 3 matchups last year, you want to make him into the scorer.
But it was the other guys that beat Michigan last year.
Yes, but So here's the problem, though. Winston is really good from that middle of the paint area. He is a great runner. He can get to a bunch of different floaters and little shots around the basket. He can hit pull-up jumpers. He hasn't been as good last year as he was last year, but that's still a risky proposition to say we're going to just push him into the middle of the paint and let him score. Do you think Michigan sticks to that drop coverage?
I would think so, based on you. At this point, this is who they are. It's kind of, now they've had a week prep, so that's kind of a wild card. Is that if they did want to change something, they've had time. It's not like it's a tight turnaround. But surely they're going to go back. This is a new staff outside of Sadi. Sadi knows all these games, but these guys are going to be watching all this film fresh, and they're going to go back and watch the last 2 years worth of games. And in 2017-18, Michigan basically put a cover 2 on Winston. They left 2 guys on him until he passed the ball. And that worked. And considering Michigan State's 3-point shooting this year, that might be the best move. It would be going away from what they've done and what they've spent months practicing. But, if you go back and remember the Kentucky game, when Kentucky just kind of threw everything it had at Cassius, and just as importantly as taking away his scoring, it took away his vision. And he could never find the roll man. He couldn't see anything. And, it's the hardest part when you talk about Michigan defending Michigan State is that you can come up with a counterpoint to everything you say. That for me is probably the hardest one to come up with a really good counter. What do you got?
At this point in the season, I think both teams probably still want to stick to the team they want to be.
Yeah.
And I look at Michigan's defense is designed almost entirely around the idea of not giving up assisted shots. They're ranked second in the country in percentage of allowed or assisted makes allowed, and Michigan State's ranked second in the country in percentage of assisted makes scored. Yeah. Right, so they're basically on entirely different ends of the spectrum. I do think Michigan State's scorekeeper might have something to do with that because Michigan State's way down in defensive assisted makes, but still. That speaks Michigan being so good preventing assisted made field goals speaks to the fact that they want to play on an island defensively and don't want to overhelp. Michigan State, given what it is right now, seems like a team that you might want to overhelp a little more aggressively on. I agree with that. I just don't know if Michigan goes into the game with that plan, considering it kind of goes against everything that they are built on. Look at Peyton Pritchard late in the Oregon game. Left Simpson on an island, did not try to change anything in that regard. Yep. That is kind of what it comes down to. If that's who you are, it takes a lot to convince yourself to deviate from that, right? Michigan doesn't give up 3-point attempts. If you overhelp, you're going to give them up. It's just we don't know if guys like Henry or Gabe Brown are going to hit them at any given point. Yeah. So it's a tough situation to gauge. I tend to think Michigan will stick to what it does and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, potentially make some kind of adjustment. Because
the other caveat to all of this is whatever defense you choose, an inevitable residual is going to be what are you looking like in terms of countering Michigan State's offensive rebounding. And, the idea of taking a John Teskey, and really bringing him out on the perimeter to help and do all these things, you do leave yourself a little bit susceptible. Now, you're probably always going to be susceptible against Michigan State's offensive rebounding regardless of what you do, but it's just always something worth considering is where's your personnel when a shot goes up? Because, Michigan State isn't a great shooting team, but it can feast on the boards.
Yeah, and we talked about the Michigan's guards doing a good job boxing out. I do think that having Brandon Johns on the floor instead of Isaiah Livers makes Michigan a better rebounding team. Livers has been, now I don't want to say downright bad, but poor on the glass this year. Like all of his numbers are down. Brandon Johns might not be able to really do a lot on offense quite yet, but he can rebound, and he could strengthen Michigan's defensive rebounding around the basket, I would say.
Right.
But you have to worry when you look at a guy like Gabe Brown crashing. Those are tough matchups for Michigan, which I can't think of a team Michigan has played this year that really tests them on the offensive boards like that. Especially from, I guess, unique positions, right? I guess Illinois, but that's more just interior offensive rebounding compared to sort of that crashing from different positions. On the other hand, I do think Michigan's transition offense is worth scheming for, and I wonder how aggressive Michigan State is. Michigan State basically didn't offensive rebound very aggressively in those games last year. Part of that was they were playing slower, et cetera, but also they were scheming against. You can't give up. When Michigan's been really good this year, it's getting transition threes, and that is something you cannot really risk. If Gabe Brown is crashing, and Eli Brooks leaks out, you can give up an easy transition three, which is just something you don't want to give up if you're defending Michigan.
Conversely, while Michigan State did play slower against Michigan last year, it also their number one goal in all three games was to run John Teskey's ass into the ground, and run. Zavier Tillman is not Nick Ward, but he can still get up and down the court. And John Teskey was worn out in all three of those games. And they're going to look to do the same thing this year, for sure.
He was. I wonder if Michigan playing faster makes that less of an impact. Teskey's played a lot of minutes this year and at a faster tempo than Michigan did last year. Tough to say if that really makes sense, but I remember especially the game in Ann Arbor. Teskey just looked exhausted.
Yes.
I also would think that playing drop coverage against ball screens is a lot easier for Teskey stamina-wise than hedging a ball screen for 20 feet every possession. So that's an easier situation, I would say, conditioning-wise. Any other high-level thought? Where do you want to go into player matchups?
Yeah, let's get into the matchups. We're half hour in, so that's about right.
All right.
So we will go. I say we go center out to point guard.
I like that. Save the best for last.
That's right. John Teskey versus Zavier Tillman in a league that is loaded right now with quality bigs. You're going to see very few better matchups than this one.
Is it a hot take to say Zavier Tillman's more important to Michigan State than Cassius Winston?
No, that's not a hot take.
His on-court, so I don't love on-off splits.
Yeah.
But Michigan State's plus 34 points per 100 possessions with Tillman, minus 4 points per 100 possessions when he's on the bench.
Well, I think you did the math on your take.
If he gets in foul trouble, I think that's a game changer. More than any other player on the court. I don't trust really anyone else on Michigan State's front court to control the paint, control the defense. There's good players, but I think the amount of discipline and communication that you get from Zavier Tillman in the middle of that defense is really hard to replace based on what's on the roster right now.
I would say in the grand scheme of things, Michigan State trying to win a national championship, Zavier Tillman is the most important player on the team. When it comes to this game, this matchup, Zavier Tillman is the most important piece that Michigan State has.
So for both? Or did you mean Cassius Winston for the first part?
I'm sorry, Cassius Winston for the national champion, for the big picture. This matchup, Zavier Tillman, sorry if I misspoke. Michigan in the three matchups last year shot 39%, 40%, 41%. The entirety of the defensive plan that Michigan State put together was based around Zavier Tillman. And listen, Kenny Goins was no joke. He knew exactly what he was doing. Matt McQuaid drove Michigan crazy in all three matchups for sure. But Zavier Tillman,
he actually put Jordan Poole over the edge.
But what they did to Michigan, it started with Xavier Tillman. He was fantastic in those 3 games. I think he's been trending too this season. The last couple weeks, people were kind of scratching their heads a little bit when it came to Zavier in Hawaii and some of the other early season games, kind of waiting for him to be this, suddenly superstar big. That's not quite his game. He looks like he's kind of the guy that he was expected to be right now, and he's definitely on the uptick.
Yeah, and he's not a post-up scorer like Nick Ward. He's not, but he's a lot of other things that sort of go overlooked. He doesn't even block a lot of shots. He's 6'8". He doesn't seem like he should be the guy that controls the paint for Michigan State, but he's just always in the right spot. He's just making a positive impact in every position on the court, I would say, and his ability to switch did change those games last year, and that's what you kind of look at this year. If Michigan has any success in the ball screen game, Michigan State knows that it can go and just switch everything with Xavier Tillman.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like they're going to try it on the fly. He's proven that he can do it. He knows how to defend Simpson's drives. That's like a great luxury to have. I would also add that he's cut his fouls down significantly. He's averaging a foul and a half less per 40 minutes, so he's down around 3.2 per 40. That's a really good number, and he's playing 75% of available minutes. That's a lot of minutes to play for a big guy, and he's been great. So
his fouls are down, his assists are up. Like he's a upperclassman big who has really learned how to was a smart basketball player as it was, and is only getting better with time. Last night he had 6 assists, no turnovers in 33 minutes.
And he's made 5 of his last 8 3-pointers.
Which I have said before is not a shot I like, but he's taking the ones that are there.
It's a shot that he'll get against drop coverage. The way Michigan defends ball screens, if he wants that shot, Michigan will give him that shot. So certainly something to watch.
The key is for him to go 1 for 1 or 1 for 2 and not 1 for 5.
Yep. That first one really sets the stage, I think.
Yeah.
And if you hit 2, then all of a sudden you have to think about changing something. Because I think Michigan will give him that shot.
Yeah.
And he's a career 32% shooter. But you look at those recent numbers, and all of a sudden you start to think maybe that is more of a shot you have to think about defending.
Yes.
What about the other side? John Teske has been improved basically across the board. I did a recent story this week of kind of going through Michigan's bigs, and I feel like I kind of overlooked how much he has improved and expanded his game. He's posting up, I think, 4 times more per game this year. He's been really efficient doing it. Michigan played through him a lot over the last 2 games, and I do think that you'll see Juwan Howard try to do that against Michigan State. We know that the first play of the game will be designed to get Teske a post touch. Michigan has done the exact same thing every single game. It's just how much they stick to it and whether it's actually something that's effective for Teske. And if without Livers, it might be something that you look to more often, I think, especially considering how important Tillman is to that defense.
Yeah.
If you get foul trouble there, that's something that's worth keeping an eye on.
And needs to convert. There is something to be said for the games when he goes 8 for 12 against Gonzaga. Probably had a lot of the same exact looks against Louisville. He went 5 for 14, and it was the entire offense was built around those shots falling. And when they're rimming out, not only is it a missed shot, but they almost have 0 chance at an offensive rebound because the guy who would be getting the offensive rebound is taking the shot sometimes. So it's big. I mean, this is one of the bigger games in John Teske's time at Michigan for him because of so much is going to be built around the ball getting in his hands, and it's not residual action anymore. He is the plan.
Yeah, which we talked about it in the offseason, but I didn't really know what to expect from him in that role, and he's been pretty good, I'd say.
Yeah, he's comfortable. He can go over either shoulder. He's got good hands, so he can catch the ball pretty much wherever you put it to him. I would like this maybe you see Michigan even be a little bit better on entry passes. But when they do get the ball to him, he is pretty clean with it. Doesn't commit that. He has had one turnover in the last 3 games. Yeah, I mean,
how many times does he have to score with his back to the basket for Michigan State to bring a double?
Oh, wow. I'll say 6 or 7.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think you can really, but it's something to at least watch. I don't know. And how he handles that. He is not – I expected more from him kind of as a post-up passer. He has not really been that. He's made a few good passes, but it has not been a big part of what he's done. He's usually looked to score, and I'm really curious in a game where he is effective posting up if teams double and how he handles that. Something to watch at some point this year, I think.
The only time he got doubled did Iowa double him?
I don't recall. He just has he had 3 assists against Iowa, but I think that was more in the middle of Iowa's zone than against double team. But he has not had a lot of big assist games this year.
Right. All right, so advantage, Michigan or Michigan State, John Teske, Zavier Tillman.
I think both guys are 2 of the best players on their team, but I will give the advantage to Tillman based on last year.
Likewise. And I really like how Zavier Tillman's playing right now.
That's fair. Both guys really tore up some.
Although he was sick last night. He was puking. I don't know if he ate something funky or if he's got a stomach bug, but I doubt it'll be an issue on Sunday. But he apparently was making a ruckus in the bowels of Breslin last night.
Wasn't an issue for him last night either. He played great.
Yeah, he was fine.
All right. Power forward. I guess we'll say, do you want to include guys who will play off the bench when we do this, kind of at the position, or are we going to stick to just the presumed starters?
Well, it's tough because we don't know who Michigan's going to have, and Michigan State goes by committee at that spot.
So let's just go big picture.
Let's go big picture. I agree.
So Marcus Bingham's been starting at the 4. He played great last night, as you said, even though he did not score. He was a rebounding presence and blocked 5 shots. Behind him, you have Thomas Kithier, you have Malik Hall, you have Kyle Arns. And then on the other side, you look at Isaiah Livers would be starting. He has been out with a groin injury. Brandon Johns got the start in his place. Colin Castleton played basically most of the reserve minutes, and then I think Franz Wagner had 1 shift at the 4. Right. So that's essentially the situation. Where do you even start with this group?
It's really hard.
If there's one, if you ask either coach to really just say, I know I'm going to get something for someone in this group, I don't know if they would take anyone, assuming Livers is out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if Livers is good to go, this is clearly an advantage for Michigan. But let's consider if he's not in, who's the proven? Thomas Kithier is the closest thing to a proven commodity of all the guys that we're talking about. Because yes, Marcus Bingham is coming off the best game of his career, but as we talked about earlier, there's a good chance that this game is a bad fit for him. He is still a pretty significant liability once you get him in a ball screen defensively, and there's a reason for his minutes are as low as they are. One is conditioning. The other is every time he misses an assignment in a ball screen, Izzo takes him out and then seems to forget that he's there. So there's, everyone feels great about last night, but I think that won't, weigh too much come Sunday. So Kithier is really the closest thing to anyone that I would feel overly comfortable relying on, and that's on both sides and in rebounding. So, of that lot, I'd say it's probably, if Livers is out, I'd probably say advantage Michigan State because of Bingham's length and Kithier's reliability.
Feels like a Kyle Arns game to me.
Every game's a Kyle Arns game, man. Whether he does anything or not, he's going to play 20 minutes.
It seems like, especially if Michigan goes small at all, it feels like a game where Kyle Arns could prove useful. Do you agree or no? You think every game is like that? I don't Illinois is not a Kyle Arns game.
Well, the thing with Arns that I've kind of been feeling is that, he's a senior who's played a million games and gone through all of these crazy experiences. He's older. He's seen everything, done everything. Like, he's going to do some stuff in this back half of his senior season, no doubt. Whether it's a game where he just comes out and hits someone for 3 or 4 threes, he's going to have that senior uptick. It happens every single time with players like this. So maybe, maybe this is a game where he's a difference maker and it's the senior story and blah, blah, blah. But, in terms of matching up with Michigan, it depends on the personnel. But he is, Izzo trusts him. Izzo trusts him to defend. Izzo trusts him to attack the glass.
If Izzo's screaming about missed ball screen assignments, I feel like the natural reaction is to just put Kyle Arns in the game and he'll figure it out.
Yes. But Kithier, too, is gaining that level of reliability, expectation for, you're just going to go in and do your job. Yeah,
and I could see Kithier scoring like 3 back cut layups if Brandon Johns is playing 30 minutes.
Definitely, that's a great point. That's a great point. But Johns is one of the great wild cards of this game. Hometown kid, right? If you want to get into the narrative shit, he's from Lansing. It was a big deal when he went to Michigan. He'll have a lot of family there. He has seen 100 games in his life at Breslin. Big spot for him. If he'll be in the starting lineup if Livers isn't there, and a moment for a guy who has talked openly about his confidence and about his mentality and all of these things. Going into a game like this, very curious to see how he responds here.
Yeah, and do you think it's fair to say the last December was his maybe best month of his career? I think he's played
no doubt.
Pretty well. He's had some good moments. He looks to be gaining confidence in a way that he didn't really show earlier in the season. He is. It's just going to come down to if he's going to catch the ball and shoot it from the wing, and if he is making those shots. I think that's a huge factor because I think Michigan State's going to give him that shot and not give it to him, but they're not going to scheme around it, right? And I really have no idea what to expect from him in that regard.
He's 2 for 10 on threes this year. I think I would play off him all day, especially if they're going for post touches for Teskey. You don't have to go to a true double team, but you can you want to make him uncomfortable, right? So you can leave Brandon Johns all day. For Brandon Johns, he needs to go into this game with the same mentality he did in the Oregon game, where it was just defend and rebound. Just let everything else come to him. He doesn't need to worry about, I'm going to catch a ball and make a play happen. Like, you don't need to be thinking that way. He just needs to go and impact the game. And if he does that, he'll be fine. So, offensive rebounding, if he can just go and steal a couple extra possessions for Michigan, that can be the small thing that tilts this game.
Yep, I think his offensive rebounding would definitely be an X factor because Michigan doesn't really have a great offensive rebounding threat without him, and he has proven that in big games he can go and get extra chances. He had, 4 against Oregon, 5 against Iowa, so that is something he can do. It's considering how little he's played and the fact that the game is back home in East Lansing, it is it's just a complete wild card, I think, how he plays in this spot.
Right. It could be the game that changes his career. It could be the game that just completely overwhelms him and sends him back to kind of the doldrums of last year. And it sucks to kind of talk about a guy that way, but that's kind of the way it is. So at the 4 spot, though, overall, we're going to say advantage Michigan State.
Yeah, just because
minus
I think
Livers.
That's a huge injury.
Livers is the leading scorer for Michigan is a notable piece.
John Teskey's the leading scorer for Michigan, for the record.
Is he?
Yep.
When did he overtake? Oh, when he scored 25 or whatever the other day?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Get your facts right.
I haven't been up on my box scores.
let's get into the three where you might say that two of the highest ceiling players on both teams are, but I'm not sure anyone is completely happy with how they've played. Basically, we're talking about Aaron Henry against Franz Wagner. Okay, let's start with Wagner. What do you make? I know we made such a big deal about how he started early he got thrown into the fire in the Bahamas and played all those tough games. The two bye games in December didn't really go according to plan. He played 17 minutes in both. I think he was under the weather in the first one, foul trouble in the second one. He's shooting 29% on threes. He's turning the ball over a lot. He also showed that he's capable of going for 21 points against Oregon. Where do you fall on, like, what should the expectations for Franz Wagner be in the Big Ten this season?
Oof. I mean, I think he's going to be a guy. He's going to play a lot, so he's going to have to produce. I mean, expectations for him?
Like,
I
what?
have no idea.
Yeah, what is he as a player in this system? Do you think he grows into a guy who's shooting 40% from three? Do you think his shot is an issue?
I don't think his shot's an issue. I
can't figure out what to expect.
I don't think his shot's an issue. I think he's trying to do a lot right now. And what he needs to be doing is only worrying about using his length on defense, making three-pointers, and getting out and trying to impact the game in transition offensively. Like, start with those three things and let everything else go from there. Right now, it seems like anytime he's got a little hot potato thing going on with the ball, and I think a lot of that accounts for the turnovers. But he's supposed to be this, developing pro with all these skills, and he played a different way in Europe. Like, there's a lot. He's played 9 games. I think 9 games from now, we're going to be talking about a little bit of a different player.
Yeah, and whatever he is 9 games from now is probably what determines Michigan's ceiling as a team, I would say. The turnovers are really, I think Michigan's going to have to try to play through him some in East Lansing, and he needs to be better with the ball, confident finishing. You look at the Oregon game, he was 4 of 6 on twos, got in the paint, finished, didn't turn the ball over. A lot of his turnover issues have come when he's cutting or kind of driving by someone and gets into traffic. Those are the mistakes I think he needs to wipe away, and the rest will flush out from there. Yeah,
I mean, especially in the half court, like, every touch doesn't need to be, I'm going to go downhill and score, or I'm going to put a shot up. Like, just moving the ball. There's a lot of times where the right play is just to pass to the next man, right, and make the right read. And he just will suddenly kind of freelance like 2 or 3 times a game, right? Or 2 or 3 times a half sometimes. And it's just a wasted possession. That can't happen, especially in this game.
Yeah. So are we agreeing he's the biggest wild card in this game? I think.
Other than, him and Johns for me. If Livers isn't playing, because if Livers isn't playing, it's such a massive hole in minutes, not only production. But yeah, I mean, I think, put it this way, I think Michigan can win this game even if Franz Wagner goes for 8 points. I don't think Wagner has to have 18 points for Michigan to win. Like, that's the only way.
Okay.
I
think he needs to give you something. He needs to hit a couple threes, I think, to have any chance for.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm the staff, I'm not feeling great that he scored 7 points in the last 2 games against UMass Lowell and Presbyterian.
Yeah, those are the games you were hoping he would
exactly
get on track.
Right.
And it leaves you with sort of an uncertain feeling when you're looking at what happened, even if there's a reason for it.
But I do like that, once he got comfortable, right? So after Atlantis, after going to Louisville and kind of getting his bell rung a little bit, the next really big game after that was Oregon at home. And I like the fact that Wagner stepped up big time in that game. Like, he had a big moment, like he was moment ready, that it wasn't too big for him, and he got his shots and he was ready to play and played 34 minutes in that game. Obviously it was overtime, but I'd feel better if I'm Michigan knowing that that's in him, that you've at least seen it once, you know. I'd be curious to see. And he also put up 18 against Iowa, but
those games are both at home. What would you set the percent chance that Franz Wagner fouls out of this game? I'd put about 80%.
Sounds about right to me. I like that.
That's
Is there any action on that?
Lock that one in. Aaron Henry. Where are we on the Aaron Henry? Are we pumping him up? Are we putting him down?
I'm pumping him up.
You've been pumping him up, even when others were putting him down. You are his number one supporter. He's shooting 33% on twos and 15% on threes in 3 Big Ten games. That's not great.
His last 3 games.
Where do we like where he's at?
On the uptick.
Okay. He's been playing a larger playmaker role, I'd say. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Putting the ball in his hands more. He's had some big assist games, but he also has 18 turnovers in the last 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I don't really know who Michigan has that can guard him athletically. Who can stay in front of him? Who can stay in front of his first step, and who can keep him from getting to that free throw line area where he's really good at either putting the ball in or making a pass. Do you think about putting Eli Brooks on him if you're Michigan?
Ooh, I don't like that. Mainly, he's way stronger than him. Can play right into his body. Can play over top him.
So do you like Franz Wagner guarding him?
No, I would.
I like Franz Wagner guarding Gabe Brown more than Aaron Henry.
I don't know. You inject Isaiah Livers with something and send him out there. How's that for a plan? Of those options,
it's a tough spot for.
I think I'd rather go length on Henry and put Franz on him, and then go Eli on Gabe, because Eli is at least quick enough to recover when they just try to find him in the corner all day for threes and stuff like that. Eli can at least get in and out. And yeah, if I have to go with,
those matches are dicey for Michigan.
But
tough. Also,
I go length on Henry though.
If Michigan State's plan is to run all the offense through Aaron Henry, maybe that's a win for Michigan. Aaron Henry's ceiling as an offensive player is not Cassius Winston's ceiling as an offensive player, even with a mismatch.
The problem is that the way that they play with Henry and the amount of stuff he does going downhill, he could also draw 2 fouls on Franz Wagner in 5 minutes.
Correct.
And then
the problem is that
then you want to talk about getting dicey. That's not good.
And the problem is that allows Cassius to play off the ball where he's probably even better, which is something you need to really test you to stay home on him, right? And that's a difficult spot. So we're going to give the advantage to
Aaron Henry
here. Okay. I think that's right.
He will impact the game on the rebounds. I like that he is starting to get more comfortable finding guys. Obviously, he needs to cut down on the turnovers, but he is starting to impact games in every area, and that's kind of who everyone thought he would be. And ever since that Northwestern game where it looked like he had never played basketball before, that was 3 weeks ago, I'm generally seeing a steady rise from him, and I think it's going to continue.
That's fair. I just don't think you really know what you're getting from either one of these guys in any given game.
True.
Henry's shown his ceiling more often, but I don't know. It's a dicey.
Put it this way:
it's a swing matchup.
If you say which one of these guys could go out and score 16 or more points in this game, it's Franz.
True.
But I would still go on just a guess of how this thing goes. I'd give the advantage to Henry.
Yeah, that's right. The two, we have Eli Brooks against the combination of Gabe Brown and Rocket Watts.
Why wouldn't you do the combination of David DeJulius and Eli Brooks?
Correct. We should have done that. Apologies. Maybe you should be running us through this. So yes, it's those two. And honestly, we probably could have talked about DeJulius at the 3 because he plays a lot of minutes there. So I would say Michigan's guards shoot the ball better from 3. Both are shooting better than 40% from 3. Watts is at 20% and Brown is at 34%. Most of what they do, both sides really, is catch and shoot. I think Michigan State's defensive plan will be to try to force Eli Brooks to do something with the ball in his hands rather than allowing Simpson to operate. And
you want to force them into the middle. Absolutely.
Eli's struggles have been that he's not athletic or crafty enough to get all the way to the basket, and he's shooting 39% at the rim, which means he shoots a bunch of pull-up jumpers, which he actually hits at a higher rate than he hits at the rim, but he's still in the 40s on that shot, right? So he is basically a Joshua Langford in the sense that he takes a lot of mid-range shots, and if you can force him into that role, I think that's a win for Michigan State.
I agree completely. The interesting thing for me, just to kind of flip it a little bit, is Gabe. There will be stretches of time where you don't even know he's on the court. There's still that tendency where he's just kind of out there running up and down, and then he goes and jumps over 3 people and grabs a ridiculous rebound, and everyone remembers Gabe Brown's out there, or he bangs 2 straight threes and the place goes crazy, and now he's dancing and the game changes. But for the 10 minutes before that, you don't even realize he's there. Which do you get in this game? Because I do think that made threes are going to be at a bit of a premium in this game. And if he can be a guy who gives them, 3 good ones, that could make all the difference in the world. At the same time, I certainly think DeJulius and Brooks could combine for 5 made threes.
Which side of the matchup do you think is more likely to allow the other side to get 5 or 6 open threes? I don't watch Michigan State close enough to really gauge how good he's been off the ball defensively. Would you say that's a...
I'd say the combination... Rocket Watts is a pretty damn good defensive player. Gabe Brown is longer than hell. In terms of limiting the good looks, I would give the advantage to Michigan State.
Interesting. I would say Eli Brooks is probably the most disciplined defender of that group of 4 players. You disagree with that?
No.
I think he's pretty key for Michigan's. I think
a different question. Because the thing is that Gabe can also shoot over guys.
Okay.
And Rocket can kill you on if you take away his look, if you close out hard, you're leaving yourself open to a blow by at all time. He had a great take last night that showed the game slowing down a little bit for him, where the ball came to him, he went into triple threat, the closeout came, and he just had like a half-second hesitation into a right-hand drive that I feel like in the beginning of the year he would have just catched and launched that goddamn thing as fast as humanly possible, or caught and drive immediately. But he had that little hesitation, the game slows down, and then he goes by. And little by little, he's getting pretty good.
If I'm Michigan, I will 100% let Rocket Watts try to beat me by scoring. I mean, maybe you lose that way, but I think that is a plan that sounds plenty good to me, given that he's shooting 41% on 2s and 20% on 3s.
Yeah, I mean, but now let's look at it though from after his injury. So these are the last 2 games, and now it's obviously a much. I feel like the beginning of the year.
If we only evaluate everyone on their last 30 minutes, how are we going to feel about the game?
Well, there was a 5 or 4 game gap in between him being a guy who had no idea what he was doing to a guy who was forced to sit and watch college basketball for 4 games, and he came back and his shots are down, his turnovers are down, and his productivity is gradually going up.
Sure. I think we need to see more. I'm not saying he's not going to be a good player by the end of the year, whatever. But if you're Michigan and you're making a game plan and you have to choose one or two guys to beat you, he's going to be near the top of the list. Just like Michigan State probably wants to funnel the ball to Eli Brooks because he's not necessarily great making those mid-range shots, right? Or he is good at it, but he's going to settle for that.
Sure, and I think Eli is a smart enough defender where he's going to see Rocket Watts on tape, understand the type of player he is, and realize that if you put yourself in position, the right position, you can force Rocket Watts into doing some bad things. And
exactly. That's kind of my point.
There will be a lot of that. So between that from Rocket and Gabe still basically being a standstill shooter, I don't know. I mean, I'm all over the place on this one.
I like what Michigan has. I think if Michigan wins this game, Eli Brooks and David DeJulius have to outplay Watts and Brown, and I think they're capable of it. I think I lean Michigan on this matchup because they're the better shooters. I think that is going to be really key, especially if this game devolves into a game that's played basically off the ball screen. You're going to have to be able to hit, catch, and shoot threes.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of my trust for guys having a good game, I would go DeJulius, Brooks. I think Watts, Brown have the higher upside or potential for kind of game-changing plays and things like that. But in terms of 40 minutes of basketball, DeJulius and Brooks are probably the safer combo bet.
That's fair.
Look at us agreeing. This is nice. 2020. It's a new year.
Happier time.
Point guard.
All right. Simpson, Winston, part 3.
More than that.
Well, third year.
Third year. Okay.
Third year is starting point guards.
The first round went to Zavier. Second rounds went to Cassius, decidedly. And here we are now. This is a huge game for Zavier Simpson. For the guy who wants this team to carry his disposition and feed off of his energy and the amount that he prides himself on being the man. This is a big time game. Needs to answer the bell, certainly for Michigan to have a chance in this one.
I mean, that's no disagreement
and
here.
The question for me is whether him answering that bell is him playing a smart game, doing everything that you see him do when he's at, the top of his game, or, if he can kind of get thrown off his tracks a little bit and try to do too much because, that when things go sideways, it does often correlate with that.
So here's my problem with that narrative.
Okay.
There's a chance that at some point in the game, it'll be Zavier Simpson, Eli Brooks, Adrian Nunez, Brandon Johns, and John Teskey on the court.
Sure.
I don't care what you say. There's no way that Zavier Simpson can try to do too much in that situation. Sure. He has to do everything. You agree with that?
Yeah.
So
there's also been times where he's been playing with 4 certainly capable players, and the matchup gets to him a little bit, and he has tried to take 4 straight looks and dials himself up more than other guys and gets out of his own game. That has happened. I know that you think Zavier Simpson is literally the patron saint of point guards.
But there's no way that Michigan wins this game if Simpson doesn't completely control it from start to finish.
Yeah, but controlling it is, I agree with you. And I think there's the way that he can control it is by staying within himself. Sometimes he goes a little bit outside of himself. Most basketball players you could say the same thing about.
Yes. I just think it's going to come down to him making shots because I think Michigan State is too good defensively to allow him to kind of pick them apart like Simpson has done in some of his best games this year. Right? Michigan State's not going to sit there and let Simpson get 5 transition assists, 5 ball screen assists, and then score 6 points and then dominate the game. If Simpson has that kind of stat line, like 6 points on 6 shots and 12 assists, Michigan is going to win the game probably in a landslide. I think you're going to see a situation where Michigan State does not give him those passes and funnels him into the middle of the floor and tries to make him score. And do we know how to predict if his hook shot's going to go in? Like, that's what it's going to come down to. It looks ridiculous. So if it misses, everyone's like, why is he taking that hook shot? When he makes it, you forget about it and you're like, I love when he makes that hook shot. So that's what it comes down to for me. Simpson hook shots, which he's going to take 3 or 4 in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, do they go in? Do they miss? I don't know. I don't know what to think. But this game is just all going to come down to what Michigan can get out of that high ball screen. Transition's really interesting to me. For years and years, this has been a story of Michigan trying to limit Michigan State's transition. I don't know that we can be as confident in Michigan's transition defense this year, but I also wonder if Michigan could try to run more aggressively and what impact that could have in the game. Simpson's had some really, really good moments in transition. He's also thrown some passes in transition that would qualify as what you're saying, kind of forcing the issue.
Yeah.
Can he thread that needle between those two sides of the coin?
So let's just look at last year's games. The first game, he went 7 for 15 from the field, 2 of 7 threes. He tried to do a lot. He needed to do a lot. I thought he had mostly a pretty decent showing, though, in that game. They limited his assist. He had to rely on his shots, and he tried to do what he could. The second 2 games, or the final 2 games, he went 3 for 13 in the first one, 3 for 9 in the second one. And
he was really good.
He had 10 assists in that game. But I felt the second game, I thought he was definitely an example of he made
big timeout.
He made the game too big.
Yeah, and especially
anyone in the program will tell you that he made that game way too big. He made that game about him versus Cassius, and it threw him way off kilter.
There's going to be no better example of what you're saying than when he did the fake timeout thing twice.
Yes.
And the second time, it actually, no timeout was called. I couldn't imagine Beeline ever played him in a game again after he did that. But it'll be, how does that play out with a new coach who has almost empowered Simpson more? I mean, who knows, right?
I know. I completely agree. And I think you're right. In the Big Ten championship game, I think he did have more of an equilibrium, and he was better in that one. They just lost. They just got beat. They had the game. They had that game and lost it.
If you shuffled up all the possessions that Michigan and Michigan State played last year, Michigan wins a lot of games.
Yeah.
Right? Like Michigan was winning by double digits in 2 of the games, winning by 5 points in the second half in the first game. So it's not like if everything Michigan did was shut down by Michigan State. It was that Michigan State made the exact right plays at the exact right time because Michigan State was a better team. They executed better. They had guys they trusted. Like, that's what those games came down to.
And if I remember correctly, it was in a lot of clutch moments you would get the ball goes to Iggy Brasdakis and he went 1-on-5 and would force a shot trying to make the big play or whatever, just other examples like that, or Jordan Poole forcing something, whereas Michigan State would have a massive possession with 2 minutes left, run a offensive set to perfection, find Kenny or Matt McQuaid for an open 3, bang it, and that's all she wrote. That was the big difference between those 2 teams last year. One team had seniors who made shots.
Yeah, and Michigan. So for Simpson, though, what we're not talking about is Isaiah Livers is basically an extension of Zavier Simpson.
Right.
So much of what Isaiah Livers does on offense comes directly from Zavier Simpson. And so much of what Zavier Simpson can be on offense is enabled by having Isaiah Livers there. Mm-hmm. Just like Iggy Brasdakis was really the same way. That's going to make things very difficult on Michigan's offense. And they have a week to come up with adjustments, do different things, but we don't really know what that's going to – you can't judge what that'll look like against Presbyterian and UMass Lowell. We don't know how well the ball screen can really work in that situation, and that's a really key factor to watch, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's right now, it's 11 a.m. Friday. Juwan is scheduled to speak at 3-something, 3:15 or so. And yeah, but the thing is, I thought this when he was injured originally and they said he was out indefinitely. I don't think this is something that's going to be a long-term issue, but it does work well if they knew he wasn't going to play that game and then would have a week off before Michigan State, and you could put Michigan State in a spot of having to wonder and prepare for Michigan with and without Isaiah Livers. So I think there's a 0% chance that we get an actual update on if Isaiah will play on Sunday, and you could see him come trotting on out on Sunday afternoon in East Lansing after Juwan Howard says next to nothing this afternoon. If I had a bet, I'd bet on that.
Yeah, there's no reason to show your hand, so to speak, right? Why would you?
Right.
It's not like it's the NFL and you have mandatory injury reports and whatever else. And if you're Michigan State, there's no reason to not prepare for Isaiah Livers.
I think they learned that lesson from Miles Powell.
Fair enough.
Okay, so Cassius, we know. I think considering the year that he's had, he seems to be in a pretty good place. He's just getting better and better. I think he's rounding into the guy that he was supposed to be. If you saw that Illinois game last night, they tried everything they could on him defensively, and still he just on a couple times was able to find just the smallest window for his shot, and he just banged them each time. And that's the guy he's going to be. Michigan's going to have to throw everything it can or everything it has at him, because I don't see him having a poor game. Michigan can make him have a poor game, right? If they really do their job. I don't see him having a poor game.
So let's look back at last year. First off, Michigan basically took away the three from Winston. I think he only made a couple threes in the 3 games total. And the first thing you absolutely can't do when you're defending Cassius Winston is you can't give him a single catch-and-shoot 3-point look. When he is off the ball, you absolutely you can't give those shots up. He's shooting 41% on catch-and-shoot threes. If he takes a 3, it has to be off the dribble. You cannot lose him. And Michigan, to its credit last year, did a really good job of that defensively. He was so good, but Michigan actually really bottled him up for the first third or half of most of those games, and then he kind of took over down the stretch. You might have to correct me on this, but I don't seem to remember him operating off the ball nearly as much as he's starting to do in these last couple games. They are more and more with Aaron Henry becoming a guy with the ball in his hands. There was no one else on last year's Michigan State team that could dribble. That was an issue. Matt
McQuaid occasionally would have the ball out top, and they would let Cassius work off the ball.
It was not something you would trust in that sort of spot.
But I'm just saying it happens it's happening more now that you're seeing Cassius operate off the ball.
Yeah, and I actually really like Aaron Henry on the ball more than I kind of expected to entering this season. Everyone acts like he hasn't improved at all. He didn't really have that last year. You were not doing that through Aaron Henry last year. So here's the stat that I think gives you a little hope defending Cassius Winston. He's only shooting 32% on off the dribble jumpers this year. Mm-hmm. That's a shot he hit at, I don't have the stat pulled up, but a significantly higher clip last year. So he has been a little off, and last year you were worrying 100% about any of those shots too, right? Like you were not letting him get a shot. Now if you're going to let him dribble into those shots, maybe it's not quite the same level of risk. But at the end of the day, there's not really any secrets in this matchup, right? I mean, I think both guys will have to guard each other basically the whole game. I don't really see them switching that up all that much. And it's so funny because it comes down to this one-on-one matchup, but so much of their effectiveness is based on what everyone else does. And like, you forget that.
Yeah.
Like, Matt McQuaid was really good in those Michigan State games last year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Cassius had 8, 7, and 11 assists in those 3 games. Those were guys making shots.
Yeah, the 2 stats to watch between the two guys is 2-point field goal percentage and assists, right? If they're making 2s and getting assists, they're winning the game. It's pretty simple. That's where I would look. Like, if you just show me the 2 stats on the box score on Sunday at 4:30 when the Eagles are about to lose, I would.
We're gonna have to wrap this up.
Be able to choose who wins. You agree with that?
Not cool, man. I'm not. I don't even know what you said. I'm not agreeing with it. No, yeah. If you look at, I think he went a combined 2 for 13 on threes in the 3 games last year, and they won all 3. I think that 100% proves your point.
Mm-hmm. And he was, I think, 14 of 21 at the rim, which is really, really good for a 6-foot guard.
And in the first game, he drew 14 free throws. In the second game, he drew 9. He went 13 for 14 in the first game, 8 for 9 in the second one. I think the first game was built up a little bit by late game stuff, but point remains, not only was he scoring on 2s, but he was drawing fouls by attacking the interior of Michigan's defense.
Fair point.
All right,
foul trouble, something to watch.
No doubt.
Think neither team can really afford foul trouble at point guard or center, and that would flip the game upside down for at least a half.
Which is what really brings up the big question, and that is, who is the staff working this game?
People want to know.
After Mike Eads' performance last night, I'm not trying to see him go walking into Breslin again. My God.
You'll get a big-time crew for this one.
No doubt. Who's on the call? Do you know? I haven't seen that.
I have not looked.
Raph was in town last night. Hopefully he sticks around. Okay.
Are we doing picks?
Wait, we have to do advantage. Zavier.
Oh.
Give the people what they want, Dylan. Jesus.
Oh, man. You go first.
Okay. I'm going to say Cassius Winston, based in part on last year, based on part on the pieces around him in this game.
I think Simpson's had the better year this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think Winston has the advantage in this situation, based on what you say last year and the fact that Isaiah Livers could be out. Yeah. I'm really fascinated to see if Michigan State switches 1 through 5 or tries to play it straight up, because I do think if they play ball screen straight up with kind of a soft hedge like they like to do, I think there's a point where Simpson gets comfortable a little bit, and then Michigan State switches.
Mm-hmm.
That's my prediction.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, there will be. It's not only what we're looking at in the first 5 minutes. It'll be the adjustments that come along the way.
And Juwan Howard is basically a massive X factor in that regard, because we knew so much about how Beeline and Izzo thought going against each other, and we saw it progress with different rosters, all these different. We have no idea what Juwan Howard's going to do. We know he can coach. He's already beat some really good coaches this year, but we haven't seen that back and forth chess match of, I know you like to do this, so I'm going to do this, and you know that, but I know you know that, so I'm going to do this. We don't have a clue for it.
Do you remember Beeline after the first game here last year? We came walking into the press conference just completely flummoxed. I have never seen them switch every ball screen. I can't believe they did it. They didn't prepare for it at all. And they spent the entire first half scrambling to try to figure out what the hell to do, because they were just completely caught off guard. That's the good stuff.
And that's Michigan State ever switched a ball screen before that? I don't know. Not often.
No, that's what Beeline said. I've never, not against Michigan. he had never seen them switch a full screen period. So, yeah, wild stuff, and we'll see. Okay. Any other X factors or anything like that? I don't think so. We're already an hour, 25 minutes into this, so we should probably get our picks and wrap this up in a tidy 90 minutes.
And you are picking?
I am picking Michigan State by 4.
Ooh, close.
Close.
I think Michigan State by 9. I don't think you see Michigan. I think Livers could change this game if he plays, but on the road, Michigan has not played well. They at Louisville or Illinois, and it's hard to see that changing in this spot given everything else that's on the table.
How many threes does Michigan have to make to win this game?
How many threes? I'll go with 9 or 10.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. Like they got to make shots.
And I have a hard time getting to 9 or 10 if Livers doesn't play.
Totally agree. And that's the thing. That kind of goes back to what we were saying. You know, if John Teskey can come out of nowhere and he makes 4 threes or something like that, and that changes the dynamic, you know, I feel like that's the type of thing that, you know, and that goes for anyone as a road underdog against one of the top, 10 teams in the country. You saw it with Oregon when they came into Chrysler. You know, that's what you need to do.
Yep. What's Zavier Simpson's 2-point shooting line?
3 for 10.
That was basically his average last year. I'll go 4 of 8.
If it's 4 of 8, I feel a little bit better about Michigan's chances.
Yeah, that might be 3 for 10 might be a better pick, but that's the stat I'm excited to see.
Mm-hmm. This is
what
revs our engines. What a bunch of losers! All right, we're gonna wrap it up on that. We appreciate everyone hanging in for the full 90 today. We are excited. We will record. We're planning on recording in East Lansing after the game. If not then certainly first thing on Monday morning. But we'll try to have up a reaction pod as quickly as possible after the game. So that'll do it for this week. Make sure you are checking out Hoops. I'm sure Dylan's going to have some great stuff up there leading up to tip-off.
The new newsletter.
Subscribe to that Big Ten newsletter. Hit DylanBurkhart.com. You got any nudes up there or what?
No, we're going to for Michigan State fans, though, we are going to put some of the Michigan content from the site up on there so you can get some of that.
Oh, look at you. Man of the people.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I know I'm going to wrap up this pod and go subscribe to this Big Ten newsletter. I'm excited for that. Check out The Athletic. Make sure you read this Terrence Williams story. I'm actually, as I said to Dylan earlier today, I hate pretty much everything I write, but I kind of like this one. So check that out if you get a chance. That'll do it. Thanks for listening. Be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.